Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll just give it another minute or two to let everyone dial in, and then we'll commence. Okay, welcome to the webinar. Thank you all for dialing in and joining us. This is the second in our series of recent webinars that we've done. We've tried to pick interesting topics from a risk and a security management perspective that we think are going to be of value to all of you. We did one recently on Pakistan, and now we have moved across to Nigeria. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. We've disabled videos and cameras just to really help us manage the group size, but also manage bandwidth for those of us on slightly sort of thinner margins. But when we come to the Q&A a bit later on, which we always find the most valuable part, you can see as we're in a Teams webinar at the top of your toolbar, you've got a Q&A button, not the chat button, the Q&A button. So if you can use that and put questions in there, and then we'll use that to do the Q&A session as we reach towards the latter part of the webinar. So thank you for that. So yes, Nigeria, a country with some very complex and fast-changing security dynamics. In recent years, we've seen things like the devaluation of the naira, rampant high inflation, serious security challenges across many parts of the country. It all really adds up to really give us the sense that you have to be absolutely on the ball when it comes to your risk management in country. So I'm joined today, very lucky to have Austin Pabor, our West African Regional Security Advisor. He's based in Abuja. We have Neil Peckham, our Regional Manager for Africa, currently back in the UK. I won't go through their bios, but if you'd like to find out a bit more about them or indeed contact them, you can jump onto our website and you can see that there. We also have Ben Isaac, another one of our security advisors, and Jane Nankang, who is our operations assistant. And they are both based in Nigeria. So that's really the round of intros from our side of life. On terms of the agenda, we're going to start with a bit of a Q&A session from me to Neil and to Austin. We'll start with the security update, and then we'll move on to some challenges that you might face. I'll give you a short case study on our response, Sonar. We'll then go into what I think is probably going to be the most interesting part of the session, the Q&A, and then we'll finish with some key takeaways. So aiming for about sort of 45 to 50 minutes, depending on how long the Q&A goes. But please do dive in and use that Q&A function that I mentioned. Okay, then, next slide, please. So security update and forecast, we're going to dive in straight away. And Austin, I'm going to start with you. Starting with the big picture, could you comment on what you see as the dominant threats shaping Nigeria's security environment as of now?
Thank you very much, Dan. It's good to be here. From the look of things, where we are, Dan, so much has been going on in the country regarding safety and security that has positioned the country as a high-risk country, especially to the international community. Even at face value, the extreme difficulty in getting things done and just moving from point A to point B will require an extensive consideration around security and safety. And this basically just positions the country in a high risk, as the case may be. Organizations like the FCDO, U.S. Department of State, on your website, they've put Nigeria on a need to travel basis. For whatever reasons, from militancy to gang-related violence, politically motivated violence, just the regular access to evacuation or medical support. All of this can be reasons why, these organizations have actually put the country into high risk. Nonetheless, locally, we can state that the country has, a catalog of threats and threat actors, and this can be dismembered into the different regions in the country. And I can easily say that overwhelmingly, we can have one state with two significant threats. And let me try and break it down. In the northeast, let me start with the northeastern region, which is pretty popular. Kidnappings, terrorism, threat actors like Boko Haram, ISWAP, and other threat actors in that region like ISIS, basically using the ideology as a tool to cause mayhem in the region. When you move down northwest, banditry, kidnapping, this is a place where local armed groups like the Ansaru group and then the recent La Kurawa cohort basically destroying most part of the region, especially in Zamfara state. In Katsina state, in Kaduna, these people are very active and causing an extensive amount of destruction and concern in that region. And then when we move down to the center, north center, kidnapping, banditry, communal violence, civil unrest, farmer-herder conflict, which many might say is politically motivated currently, especially with the recent incidences and killings in Plateau State, in Benue State, And then when we move down south, let's start with the west, intensive or increased level of criminality, robberies, kidnapping, farmers and herders conflict in that region, also causing a little bit of problems for them down there. And then in the southwest, I don't know, it's the alleged terror group, which is the Eastern Security Network Group, which has also been alleged to be the arm wing of the separatist movement of the IPOB. They have been, poked to be the major threat actors in that region through their, sit-at-home order that they've been trying to enforce. They've literally burned down, locations, communities, houses, killed people. As a matter of fact, they have actually broken into prisons and, causing massive mayhem in that region as well. And then in the South region, due to its geolocation, criminal groups have taken advantage of the waterways, going into piracy, militancy, kidnapping, gang-related violence in that region, causing massive concerns as well. So now generally, crime, banditry, terrorism, kidnapping, communal violence, farmers and herders conflict, these are the predominant threats reoccurring in the country. And this has impacted the country, making the risk assessment for the country a high risk. Some states suffer more than others with multiple layers of threat actors and threats in those states, moving the threat level or the risk level from green to red, which is a high risk currently. Also, white-collar jobs, fraudulent activities, cybercrime, and non-security concerns like road traffic accidents, flooding, medical or health-related concerns. All of these are basically some of the reasons why Nigeria is being categorized a high-risk country. For example, heavy downpours, I think around this time last year, resulted in a portion of the Kano-Maiduguri highway being cut off around the Malori village, something like that. And that really had a massive impact on, commuting. And then lastly, the cost of living in the country has led to inflation. Currently now we're still on the high 20s, which basically has impacted the general standard of living, the well-being of people. And also this has driven crime really high. The president also removed petrol subsidy with little cushioning plan. Evidently, this has also increased the cost of traveling, cost of transportation, and this has a cascading effect on operations and movement. This is what the country has been faced with and is still facing with currently, Dan.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Austin. Really, really interesting there. I mean, you covered a lot of ground, and we could probably have spent, an hour just on that question alone, but we'll move it on. But I think really what you're saying to me is, we can't look at Nigeria, as one risk level. We have to go into state, maybe even down into LGA, and really look at risk in a hyper localized context, and also just acknowledge the fact that the vast majority of people incurring or being exposed to the risk are local consultants, local travelers living and working in country, Nigerians living and working across the area. So we have to look at it from that contextually led, localized perspective, as well as the international perspective. Okay, thank you. Very, very interesting. So Neil, I'll move on to you. In terms of the regional dynamics in the region, we've seen a lot going on in surrounding countries. How would you see them playing out with respect to Nigeria?
Thanks, Dan. So what we have seen a massive change of the regional canvas literally in the last couple of years. We've had coups in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. We have seen that group reform themselves into the Alliance of Sahel States, taking themselves out of ECOWAS. And they have also removed Western influence. So in the same time frame, we've seen the departure of UN forces, French diplomatic and French armed forces, and also the US have been asked to remove their bases out of various of the countries in the Sahel. So a massive change, refocus towards the Soviet Union with the imposition of Wagner Group operations, especially in Mali, but essentially the Soviets aligning themselves to provide support in a military fashion to these countries against the terrorist influence, which I'll come to in a moment. And the Wagner Group in Mali have just recently been replaced by a more formalized group known as the Africa Corps, but again, Soviet forces. So this is a means for Russia to fund its current campaigns in the Ukraine, and the deal is basically military training and support in return for gold assets, gold mine access within the Sahel region. So these realignments, these changes in government and fracturing of the ECOWAS unity have given space for those terrorist organizations, jihadist organizations operating across the Sahel to expand their activities. So we've got the two current titled JNIM, the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin. You may say that's easy to say, it isn't. And are now known as ISSP, Islamic State in the Sahel province, previously known as Islamic State in the ISIG, and they were affiliated to ISWAP in the northeast of Nigeria. They were formerly affiliated by ISIS back in 2019, and since that time they have shared apparently a media office and attribute attacks in various parts of the Sahel to each other. So there is an affiliation between the northeast activities of Nigeria and the Sahel region. And as shown by this slide, there is expansion of both of those groups, the JNIM and ISSP, towards Nigeria. The JNIM are moving in the moment into northern Togo and northern Benin, and there have been a number of incidents in the past year or so to indicate their expansion there, whilst the ISSP are now moving into the northwestern states of Nigeria. So these influences are having a major change to the Nigerian perspective of security, because the border with Niger, border with Cameroon, and also to the west, to the northwest Benin. They are porous. They are not well policed militarily, and there is pretty free movement across those borders. Likewise, in terms of tribal and language affiliations, the people who live in Niger speak the same language as the people who live in northern Nigeria, and they are of historical similar heritages. So there are long and ancient links that align these border crossing points across the north. So Nigeria is still the powerhouse for West Africa in terms of military power. The chair of ECOWAS has just been handed over. It was Tinubu. He's just handed over the chair. But the Nigerian perspective has to be beyond its own borders at the moment. And we'll come on in a little while to looking to what that might mean in terms of the internal country dynamics. Okay, back to you, Dan.
Great, thanks, Neil. And I think very important to note that increasing influence of the Russian Federation in the area and how that sort of subtly upsets the power dynamics, not just for the region, but then how it plays out and really does influence at a country level Nigeria itself. And I'm sure we're going to see more of that, providing a sort of an exacerbating factor, if you like, to the local issues that Austin mentioned on his first question. Okay, thanks, Neil. So back to Austin then. We're just going to move on into challenges. If we could have the next slide. Thank you, Rosie. So challenges people are facing. We mentioned local people living and working, traveling day to day in all areas of Nigeria. How is that affecting people? How is that affecting the NGOs, the development sector programs, and also, other players who are active, such as, energy, etc.? What's your view, Austin?
Okay, Dan, just top of my head, generally, these organizations and, our clients basically kind of get exposed to things like road traffic accident. I mean, from a general view, and this is due to the fact that their operations are now restricted to using road travels due to whatever reasons, like flight disruptions and things like that. But just on a regular basis, just due to the fact that our clients have to use the road, they are exposed to road traffic accident. Curfew is one of the other things that's on top of the table. Movement restrictions, being caught in crossfires. I mean, you can look at it from the southwest region, where on a Monday, technically, there is a restriction of movement and restriction of social economic activities due to the order by the IPOB team. I mean, field officers also get the field officers, either locals or internationals, are facing or get faced with extreme risk of getting kidnapped. Obviously, if they have to travel to the road or if they have to move around in the various regions, they get exposed to kidnapping. Just recently, in one of the southern states, they had an international who had to go into one of the communities to fix a generator or something of that nature, and then he got kidnapped and it was beaten until ransom were paid and things like that. I mean, you can look at it from how businesses and patterns get exposed to risk because of all of this, prevailing activities ongoing in the country or in the region. We've also heard where roads were blocked, protests and demonstration, all of these impacting the overall free flow operations of our clients and their activities here in the country. And the list just goes on and on, Dan.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Austin. Absolutely. We can't just decide not to operate or avoid areas. Sometimes we have to access some very high risk routes, some very high risk areas. We might be setting patterns by the fact we have to go to work every day to a certain location. There might be a minimal choice of route. So we do incur risk. And I think the trick is to incur the level of risk that we're happy with as an individual and as an organization, and we stay agile and we keep on adapting and trying to stay ahead of the threat. Okay, thank you, Austin. So Neil, looking ahead, we've got the elections in 2 years' time. You could argue that Tinubu might be going into those, in a reasonably strong position. Who knows? That's 2 years away. But perhaps a little bit before that, what do you think we should be looking for and preparing for over the next quarter?
Thanks, Dan. Well, I think it's important to take stock of where the country is politically at the moment. Tinubu's government came in and carried out some arguably necessary reforms. He didn't necessarily time them particularly well, announcing, for instance, the fuel subsidy in his inaugural speech. But the removal of fuel subsidy, liberalisation of foreign exchange markets, and the most recent restructuring of the tax system, they're all necessary changes for the government to restructure the country. The problem is that what this has caused is fuel price increases, a weakened naira, a very high inflation, as mentioned by Austin, and this is on the back of poverty levels above 46%, massive unemployment, and quite a large element of the country that is well educated and frustrated and young. So the dynamics of the creation of breakaway groups, armed banditry, etc., is in some ways understandable. The concept of short-term pain for long-term gain is becoming unpalatable because the short term is growing year by year, and the pain seems to continue. So there are those problems. So where do I see it going from now forward over the next 2 quarters? Well, the organised armed groups, I think, will remain. They may even get stronger. That's both because of the cross-border dynamics I mentioned earlier, and also because of a certain amount of stasis within the security architecture within the country. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the Nigerian Armed Forces are allowed to invest in commercial enterprise. What this has meant historically is that commanders going through the armed forces have possibly been posted at various times to those commercial elements, and they have a commercial mindset. So by the time officers become senior, sort of major general rank, they are also businessmen. And with all of these security situations around the country, both the northeast with the ISWAP, northwest now Sokoto, Katsina, Kaduna area, the military forces that are deployed in that area are immediately looking for opportunity and enterprise outside of their core mission. And this, of course, brings into play corruption, cross-border smuggling, and even use of those supposed opposition groups in their business enterprises. So all of this leads towards a lack of conclusion of the operations in the pursuit of reward. It's an opaque accountability within the armed forces of the defence budget, of which Tinubu has reportedly given 4.9 trillion of the 47.9 trillion 2025 budget to defence and security. That's nearly 10% of the budget. Yet it's not auditable well within the military, and all of this causes further sort of stasis of the resolution of the problems. Then, of course, you've got the state structure across the country, individual states looking for their own slice of the cake, and the security breakdown in these states has caused an increase in the number of solutions to the insecurity problem along the lines of better equipping and arming vigilante groups, whether they be state-sponsored vigilante groups or down at the community level, forest rangers to be armed, and then most recently discussion about creation of state police forces and doing away with the federal government police, or at least having a layer below the federal police force. So all of this poses problems for security going forward. And the pressures on Nigeria are its continuing dependence on oil, the political dynamics in the military, as I've mentioned, inflation, unemployment, and poverty levels. Also, the population growth. Nigeria will be the biggest growing country in the within 30 years. It will be producing more babies than most of the other countries around the world. There are continuing land pressures as that population increases. Food security is an issue and is going to be an increasing issue as these community and armed group events continue to occur, whatever the drivers, whether it be business opportunity, whether it be application of Salafist Islamic ideology, or whether it is tribal between, say, the Fulani nomadic herders and the local indigenous farmers within Benue or Plateau or Jos State, for instance. On top of that, we've got climate change. That's a worldwide problem, but it impacts Nigeria as well. And then weak currency, and withdrawal of international aid. USAID was running up to 80 NGOs within Nigeria. That money has stopped. Likewise, our own contributions to aid are now being spent within the country due to our own problems in the UK. So I don't foresee any rapid change. If anything, I'm seeing a further slide towards classic security dilemmas across the country. And the point that Austin made is that these are really dynamic. They can blow up overnight. So a state could be green on one day and red the next. And for both companies operating in country and for those thinking of coming in, they've got to have a very dynamic security architecture that can be agile to adjust to meet these challenges as they occur. Companies thinking of coming into Nigeria need to really look at how much they are willing to invest in their security posture, and take a good look at their risk appetite before they commit to business operations. I think I better stop there. Back to you, Dan.
Yeah, as with Austin, you could probably go on for hours and hours, but thank you for wrapping that all up into a couple of minutes, Neil. And I think, to draw everything you've said together, underpinning everything is the economy. It's the macroeconomic situation. And if there was an improvement, both domestically, but also internationally to enable further investment, then, I think that's really where, the uplift lies. But the question is, when will that happen and how will that happen? Okay, thank you for that. So we've heard some great inputs there from Neil and from Austin. I'm now going to take you through a short case study, and then we're going to move on to the Q&A. So we're going to give you a case study of our dynamic risk management platform called Sonar. You may have your own platform. This could be an in-house solution or process or procedures that you have as an organization. You might have another solution from a different provider. It doesn't really matter. What I want to bring out here today is different steps that we think you should be thinking about and using as you are managing your operations around Nigeria. So let's move on to the next slide. So we're using an example of a trip, in this case, going from Kaduna to Zamfara. You need to have some way of scoping out the dynamics, the road move, the people traveling, the activities, what they're going to be doing when they're there, placing that into the risk environment. So coming up with some sort of risk rating for your movements around country. In this example, we're saying we have identified different risk factors to make it a high-risk trip. So therefore, we're going to apply a certain level of controls. And the bottom line is the higher the risk, the higher the controls, and vice versa. So there needs to be an element of approval here. There can be input from us as the security advisors, but also more importantly, input from a project manager or someone with responsibility for those teams and for those people to say, yes, I understand where you're going. I understand what the risks are. I'm going to then approve that with the following caveats, which might be a number of different ways of mitigating that risk. We call it Overwatch. You might call it journey management. Really, when people set out the door, we want some way of locating and monitoring people when they are different stages of the road route. They might be on the train, they might be flying. We want to check in with them at different points, and we want to be able to see what's going on around them as they're moving across the country. So monitored check-ins, location confirmations, yes, I will check in when I get to this pit stop for the road move or for this hotel overnight, pre-agreed, and alert triggers. So if we're seeing a build-up of some activity in an LGA that we know will affect the travellers, we then want to alert them and vice versa. So they have the ability to come back and say, hey, look, we've just seen this is unusual. What do you think? Or can you give us some more advice on that? So the Overwatch is absolutely critical. Moving across, going into the risk alerts, so having a system where you can receive information. We know there's a lot of information, particularly in Nigeria, and really the art to this is having a sort of verified filter or screening, so you can work out what is applicable to me, what is relevant, and actually what is not. So the ability to input these risk alerts into your situational awareness, into your plot, so you can apply that to the travelers and give them some contextual advice. You may want to group up those risk alerts and put them into a spot report. Next slide, please. Thank you. Really, what you're trying to do then is, as you're receiving in the alerts as effectively a sort of lower level of analysis, you can then group them up and put them into a more considered assessment of what's going on. These 3 or 4 different events actually come together to form a pattern. We're then going to group that. We call it a spot report. You might have slightly different words for it, but really sort of more considered analysis. So you can do the so what. So what does this mean to my travelers? What does this mean to the area of operations, and what does this mean to the program? If whilst people are traveling, there is some sort of incident, you may wish to be able to review where people are and when. So having a travel diary, really a list of all your travelers, their locations, from and when, so when people are on the road, the status of the trip, that really is invaluable. So if there's an incident, just say we have an explosion somewhere, you can very quickly interrogate all your information in one place and find out who may or may not be affected, and then follow up with some check-ins. Security risk assessments, if you do have lots of changes, and we were hearing from Neil, one day it's green, the next day it's red, having a library of security risk assessments that can be used either pre-mission or during mission, keeping those updated, keeping those live to the current threat, and then adjusting risk ratings, which then inform your mitigation and your measures as you are in the mission. So this needs to be as close to real time within reason. And also your mitigation guidance. It does change the mitigation guidance. Action responses. So you've monitored the travel, you've looked at what's going on around them, you've seen a build-up of threat, or there's been a change in risk that will affect your travelers, then you need to do something about it. So this is where the sort of active management of risk comes in conjunction with your security advisor, in-house or outsourced, and whoever is owning the risk, whoever owns the project, the program, the department, whoever. But you need to come to some sort of conclusion, and you might decide to change something. You might suspend travel, you might actually reassess where the team are going to, or you might want them to come back to base. So an active, decision-based management, in conjunction with the information that you're receiving. So this to us is what good risk management looks like. And of course, in case the worst happens, you do need your emergency plans, and they do need to be kept up to date. So things like hibernation, relocation, and evacuation plans. So your safe havens, your triggers, need to be known in advance before the trip. Standard operating procedures. This is to keep people out of trouble. So people need to know this again well before travel, and they need to be appropriate to the activities that you're doing. And of course, your contingencies, our two biggest risks that we worry about tend to be road travel and medical. So having good contingency protocols in place. So if and when the worst does happen, you can act quickly and minimize that as much as possible. So that was just a short case study to take you through how we would see the bare bones of having effective risk management in somewhere like Nigeria, using a systemized approach. I think the key here is to have a systemized approach, so you can really keep track of multiple missions, you can keep track of multiple risks, and you can really impose a little bit of order on what can be a very chaotic and confused picture. Okay, thank you for that, Rosie. If we can move on. Okay, then, so we're going to jump into the Q&A. We're at 25 to the hour, so we've hopefully got about 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes for Q&A. Excellent. I see some people are using the Q&A function. We're going to start with Daniel Craig Elliott. So thank you for the first one. I'll just read it out and then we will respond. So as Austin alluding to, internal movement is becoming challenging, particularly within the northeast in Borno State. INSO has lost its operational license in country. Do we as Spearfish have capacity to provide timely intelligence and information to assist organizations with road travel on a daily basis? Is the provenance of information behind sonar, which is key, i.e. the triangulation? He goes on to say there's an information vacuum at the moment, and that's exacerbated by a government which is deeply suspicious of organizations working in the security sphere. The Nigerian Secret Service have felt that in the past sensitive information was being shared with armed groups. Please comment. So what I'd ask then, Austin, is if you can talk about, where we get our risk information from and how we then put that into alert and we send that out for our clients.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. So basically we have quite a number of groups that are, security groups here in Nigeria that, we have connections to, we have networks that are open. And then as things play out in some of this very hostile region, as they are happening at the moment, people are getting information and then sharing it in some of these secret, groups where we have access to. We also explore OSINT, open source, where we can also get information as they are happening at the moment. But for us, I think our strongest network is the relationship that we've built over time with security groups, other security managers, and organizations like ASIS that I'm a member of. We do share information in those places, and then other regions, other networks, especially in the north east, we do have access to some of those networking circles in those places. So basically, that's how we get some of our information.
Great, thanks, Austin. Neil, any comments?
Yes, I understand the point about Nigerian Secret Service feeling that the NGOs have been too liberal with their support, without bias. So I can see, the concerns for NGOs operating in the northeast, that they are thought to be supporting the, for instance, if you're in the medical field, supporting injured terrorists in the same ways you're supporting security force casualties, and community casualties as well. And that's one of the problems, is identifying who actually amongst the community may actually be one of the terrorist individuals. In terms of triangulation, that is a daily challenge, not least because some of the mapping for Nigeria is not brilliant. And people will will say the names of places phonetically, which is not necessarily the way they're spelt on maps. So we do have challenges triangulating to exact locations, especially for incidents such as roadside IEDs, which are, as you say, are becoming predominant as a terrorist tool, and most recently on the Borno Yobe border. We've had quite a few IEDs of late, and down towards the south as well, down Boa way. So it is a challenge, and again, we have to look at means of travel, especially in those high-risk areas, and decide whether road travel is actually safe enough to do, and whether people should be using air, helicopters, etc., to move around the threat area. I'll stop there.
Okay. And perhaps just my view is, I'm not in Nigeria, I'm in the UK, but I do look at all of our alerts and our advice across the board. And what I would say is I haven't really seen a degradation of information coming from Nigeria. That still seems to be coming through strong. So I think our alerts and our spot reports still have the same validity they would have had before, this move with INSO, which to me is a sort of retrograde step in a deteriorating security situation. But the links are there, and we still feel we do produce this on a daily basis, as you've asked about. Okay, and now I can see a hand up from James, but unfortunately I'm not sure if we can activate your microphone, James. I'm not sure if you could use the chat function or the Q&A function.
I can activate it. I've just allowed his mic to go on. So James, if you have a question.
Okay. Well, whilst we're waiting for James to come on, I've got a question from Paul Nielsen. Good to see you, Paul. Thanks for coming on. The question is, how do you assess the presence of international groups in northwest Nigeria? And we'll send that to Neil.
Paul and I have discussed this before. That it is a challenge. It is essentially down to the feelings of the analysts, the people who watch this closely and have connections within the OAG groups. The identification and evidence is hard to indicate and identify, but I would say that ACLED's analysis of increasing expansion of these groups sort of southwards and is evidenced by the increase in the number of attacks in Benin and northern Togo, and why would they stop at the Nigerian border? It is part of an ideological expansion to try and create an Islamic state, a caliphate, and therefore I do not see any reason why they would not be involved in trying to affiliate with armed operational groups within the northwest. So my view is that they are liaising, they are resourcing, and hopefully they will identify themselves by ideology in due course. And Saru has historically been identified in the north central, north west, and again they are Salafist ideologies that the support is a mindset, whether not necessarily identified as resource.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Yeah, thank you. Austin, anything to add?
Well, not in much. I think Neil has hit this one in the head. Not in much to add for this.
Okay, thanks. Now I think I'm correct in saying, James, your microphone is now live.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Yeah, good to hear from you.
First of all, thank you very much for a very, very interesting briefing. Just two questions, if I may. The first one is really aimed at Neil. I don't know whether you're intentional when you referred to the Soviets in terms of the change of the regional dynamics in the neighbouring countries away from the West. What do you actually mean by the Soviets? Are we talking about Russia or the former Soviet Union, or are we talking about the Commonwealth of Independent States, or is it actually a general term just for Russia?
Yeah, I think you're probably showing my age there, James. It's the Russians as they are now. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And the second one, the sort of change in the oil price factor, and I've recently been in Lagos. How does the fall in the oil price affect the overall economy of Nigeria, given the fact that the economy is sort of crucial to the security implications?
Neil, do you want to have a crack at that?
Sorry, did you say me?
Yeah, Neil, do you want to have a crack at that one?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I'm not an economist, James, but any government does its we can look at our own government doing its forecasts based on certain levels of income for their saleable resource, and so if the Nigerian government have budgeted a certain amount of money coming in from their oil being sold on the open market at a certain price, any reduction in that is going to impact their flexibility in terms of what they can spend within the country, and the tighter the fiscal constraints, then the greater the challenges the government are going to have to meet the budgets that they want to hand out as part of their budget forecast. So they will have to make cutbacks, and that will constrain all sectors of the country as a result.
Thank you very much.
The only thing I can add to that, yesterday, and this is essentially unverified, but it was quoted.
And if I may just add a few things, I think.
Go ahead, Austin.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say that this also kind of plays an interesting role with regards to what happens in the oil region. I mean, depending on how the overall impact of this across the country, this criminal groups who are into militancy, I mean, the militant stage might become a concern, and this might lead to, sabotage of infrastructure and things like that. Also, social economic grievances, I mean, current evaluation, inflation, rising costs of things, all of this might be impacted, I mean, just generally. Yes, Dan.
Thank you.
Back to you, Dan. You on mute.
Mute.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, the only thing I can add to that is, Nigeria's revenues have increased over the last 12 months due to the oil price. So they have benefited, and we have seen increasing in money coming into the country, which can only bode well, going back to that sort of economic stimulus that is going to improve the security situation in the longer term.
And can I just throw in, Dan, that Dangote's refinery is making a considerable impact to the extent that they may actually be able to export refined products from Nigeria for the first time in a very long time. And as Austin has alluded to, the extraction volumes that they want to achieve also depend on cracking down on the bunkering and illegal refining that takes place within the Delta, which has happened. So there has been some considerable success in reducing the siphoning off of oil rather before it gets to export. So what they're actually producing out of the ground is starting to either go to Dangote or get out of the country as raw product.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Okay, then. So a question from Rosie. This is really to do with the community troubles we're seeing in Benue and Jos. We're seeing a lot of infighting there in the last couple of months. Could we just have a comment from each of you on the situation there? So start with Austin.
Not sure that Austin's internet connection is
we might have
stable.
lost Austin. Okay, Neil, over to you.
Yes, so this comes back to a scarce land
Say that
resource.
again. I missed most part of it, please.
Yeah, don't worry, Austin. I think your comms are probably a bit spotty, so we'll go to Neil for this question.
Um, as we've alluded to already, local politics has a big part to play, community dynamics, but it is down to land resource again. That is the breadbasket of Nigeria, as it's known, Benue State, and the higher Jos Plateau is very good for various crops as well. So there is a competition for land, and it's not just amongst the communities, but it is with the perennial problem of nomadic herders. None of the farms have fences, so a farmer's ground will finish in a ditch, and then the other side will be somebody else's land. But there's no fences, therefore the cattle can move freely as they are herded for new grazings. If the crop is the consumption, then there is obviously going to be a little bit of tension, and that tension boils over into conflict. Unfortunately, these conflicts have become so intense, people arm themselves both with bladed weapons and with direct fire armor lights. And so when these clashes do occur, there can be quite a lot of bloodletting. And unfortunately, a lot of the security response is after the event. So the flare-up is intense, it's very violent, it can involve burning of villages and property, cattle rustling and killing of communities, even kidnapping, but it can easily be de-escalated very quickly a couple of days afterwards. So this is an indication of these sudden hotspots that flare up and then are calmed down by a bit of negotiation and the arrival of security services to calm things down again.
Great, thanks, Neil. Austin, have we still got you? Not sure if we have. Okay. All right, Rose, if you could just have the slides back up, we'll finish on some key takeaways. Okay. Okay, well, look, we're approaching the top of the hour. So just to really cover off some of the things we've spoken about today, the speed of escalation and also de-escalation, as we've just heard from Neil, in terms of incidents in Nigeria, that is, it's not unique to Nigeria, of course, but it is something to note. And then that means, accordingly, you need to have an agile and equally swift security management posture. So you need to be able to react quickly and make decisions quickly and be prepared to go up and down. The importance of real-time verified intelligence, as was alluded to in Daniel's question, the closing of some of the more established networks means that we have to very much be part of other professional groups, personal networks, so we can verify and weed out some of the more inaccurate reports that we will all see on a daily basis. Having a robust travel diary, so knowing who is where and when, is incredibly important. So when you do get that rapid escalation, you can very quickly say, well, these 3 teams may be affected, let's check in with them. And there's nothing wrong with checking with people, even if they may not be towards the epicenter, but it's good muscle memory to do that. Plans and protocols, so having these in place, well before you step out the door, that people not just have the checklist, but they actually know what to do. So having that institutional knowledge to help people keep themselves safe and secure, because they really are the first line of defense. They have to have this security awareness, in their mind, based on plans and protocols that hopefully reduce down the chances of an incident happening in the first place. Should the worst happen, having a crisis management team available who are able to react, they know the country context, and they have that local knowledge that is able for you to give the best response possible to whatever crisis that might be, whether it's an RTA, whether it's someone getting sick in their hotel room, or whether it's one of the higher end events, kidnap, armed robbery, violent armed robbery, things like that. Proactive communications channels, so having plenty to draw on. You might have different phone networks, different chat functions, the ability to check in either systematically through something like Sonar or just using WhatsApp. Whatever you have is appropriate for your organization, but it needs to be run according to a systemized approach. The on-the-ground verification that we've mentioned already through local advisors, and the key word here is local. So having people on the ground who can actually get to the truth and the contextual understanding of what's going on, and it's not done from a very high level or an international level. And scalable support options. So, going back to what I said earlier on in the webinar, as the risk ramps up, your security ramps up. And as it goes down, it goes down. So you have an appropriate level of security wrapper around your operation on a risk-based approach. And then it's credible and it's value for money. Okay, right. We will draw a line under it there. I see a hand up from Joe. Rosa, I'm not sure if we can give Joe some airtime.
Yep.
Hello, Joe. Can we hear you, Joe? Possibly not. Okay. All right.
Joe says he's pressed it by accident. Please ignore.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, if there's anything you want to ask us, Joe, please do drop us a line. So look, thank you for all dialing in, taking an hour out of your day. Hopefully what we've had has been of use and it's given you information you can take back to your businesses to look after your people and keep everyone safe and secure, which is why we're all here at the end of the day. Any further questions, please do drop us a line. And we look forward to speaking to you all again soon at our next webinar. Thank you very much.